Okay, a bit of background to my foster family. Who are we? What do we do? Why are we all here today? Usually this session on a Friday, 5 o'clock, is our Fostering Friday session. We usually have a number of people come here who are interested in fostering. My foster family, as you can imagine, is about helping people come into fostering, helping Muslim children who are in care. We also have a sister organization, My Adoption Family, and again, that works in the adoption sector. Similar things, enabling Muslims to become adopters, enabling people from BAME backgrounds to become adopters and making that process better for them. We have a seat on the national table, and we have some influence in what happens, and we're trying to make sure that those processes become better processes. But actually, just wanted to go back and talk a little bit about the history of my foster family, because, and this goes back to 2016, 2017. Historically, my foster family sort of came out from what was then the Syrian refugee crisis. A number of young people, unaccompanied minors, unaccompanied asylum seekers coming into the country. And, you know, it was about seeing what we could do here to support those types of people. And those young people, children, especially unaccompanied asylum seekers. And so my foster family did a lot of work in the beginning with Safe Passage, Safe Passage UK. There were about 20 cases that we took through, and almost, I think 600 or so individuals, we helped settle them into this country. And that goes back, like I said, 2016, 2017. And that was the Syrian refugee crisis. And again, today we've done this because, you know, refugees coming into the UK, what's our role? What do we need to be doing? What's our responsibility? Again, the same sort of scene seems to be unfolding in front of our eyes in terms of what's happening in Afghanistan, but not just here in this country, obviously in other countries, but, you know, with us being here, there is a responsibility that we all shoulder. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. Some of the other things that we also do with, you know, when these unaccompanied asylum seekers and refugees had come here, we set up the Arise mentoring program, which was specifically for those young people, to give them a mentor to take them through that program. You know, COVID hit us about a year ago, and with that program's on hold, but we're looking to relaunch that program, you know, very soon, hopefully. You know, just to give an idea about some figures, there are about 4,500 unaccompanied asylum seekers here in the UK, many of which do come from a Muslim background. And I think that's almost reflective of the kind of speakers that we've got here today, Zara from the MCB, etc. And so, but we work with, you know, many local authorities. An example, maybe just to pull here, is Leeds Council, where, you know, we do work with them to try and recruit, engage with the Muslim community, to get people to come forward. What we do find is that at the moment, and this is not just Leeds Council, but across the UK, local authorities are struggling to find carers coming forward from the Muslim community and from the Black community. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what we've been doing. So, like I said, usually the call today would be about fostering, but today it's going to be slightly different. It's a bit more than that. It's more than just a call for carers. Today we're thinking about people who can volunteer in different ways. In a while, I will share a Google form in the chat, and the call really is for all types of volunteers. You know, it's almost like we want to get a talent pool. You know, if you've worked as a school teacher, you know, there's something perhaps you can do to help these young people that are coming into the country. If you're a mental health worker or a lawyer, or even if you drive a taxi, you know, so it could be in your city, we might need somebody who just to transport a young person from one place to another. So all of these things are, you know, things that we need to put in place. And so, like I said, what I will do is I will share that in the chat. Again, just to put attention to the political situation, this isn't a forum for us to discuss the political situation at the moment. So whatever our views are around the Taliban, etc., we need to get the focus here on what we need to be doing here in this country. So I will ask, you know, if we do open the floor and people do ask questions, and then let's keep it to, what's relevant to what we need to be. That's our priority. So without much more talk from me and anything else, then Naz, I'm going to ask if you can sort of unmute yourself. A little introduction to Naz Shah. I'm sure you need no introduction at all, absolutely, but Rightly Honourable Naz Shah, a Member of Parliament, also a Shadow Minister for Housing and Communities, but our local MP here at Bradford West. Also, we've been on sessions together before, so I know you've been a foster carer, and you've also fostered children, I believe, from Afghanistan as well, known for obviously standing up for the rights of minorities. So are we in a position now to do something today? And if we are, what then becomes our priority for what we need to be doing? So, Naz.
Thank you, Shakib. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Good evening. Thank you first of all, to my foster family for arranging this very urgent, very timely seminar for people, because we are in the middle of a crisis and we need to, people must step up. So I've got 3 hats on really. So I address you as the Member of Parliament for Bradford West and the Shadow Minister, but so from a political point of view. But before that, and before I came into politics, I was a foster carer. So I've been through a fostering system as a child. So I've experienced being in foster care. But more importantly for this discussion, I supported young Afghan refugees who presented without parents before I came into politics, and I fostered one of them. This morning, I took 2 calls, one from one of the kids that I supported, who's now got 5 children, and his wife, and for the last 48 hours, we had no idea where they were. We've luckily, alhamdulillah, this morning, we've located them in one of the camps. So we're trying to get them across and get them to safety. And my foster son's son and his wife, we are also trying to have those conversations of getting them here, because they were going through their normal processes of bringing their wives over, bringing their families over, and all of a sudden, their lives have been turned upside down. And it's absolutely right, and I'm glad that you've said we're not here to talk about the political situation of the Taliban, of what's happening in Afghanistan. What we're here about today is about the humanitarian crisis. So I think there's 3 things, and the third one, so one is as a foster parent, somebody, and as a local politician, and as a Muslim, because we're talking about what is our responsibility as a member of a community. As a Muslim, what is our responsibility? How do we respond to this crisis? And so that's where people like yourselves come in to put these seminars together, to get the information out there, to bring people together who have an interest, listen to people about what expertise they've got. You've got many people on this call who've got vast amount of experience in dealing with these crisis issues, whether that's from, whether it's Azim or Jangir, from, charities that respond to emergency situations, whether that's people in Bradford or across up and down the country who have provided support to people in crisis. So politically speaking, if we start at that level, we're doing what we can in terms of, there was a debate on Wednesday. I couldn't attend. I'm recovering from pneumonia and here in Bradford. So actually, this is my first work event that I've done, so to speak, on a Zoom, getting up now, and I wasn't able to attend the event in Parliament, but I did put out my statement about what I feel about the number of refugees. So there's a political debate to be had, which is, what are we doing as politicians, as elected members, and to hold the government to account by putting numbers on refugees? And that's the political debate that I'm not sure is for this forum in itself. The second issue is about what the local councils and what you can do locally and what people can do locally. And then there's a third one, which is, what do we as organisations and as members of the community? Because yes, I might be a member of Parliament, but I'm a member of my community, and I'm an active member of that community. So what's my responsibility? What I can do or what I can't do, or what I should be doing? And that's where this conversation becomes really, really important, and especially for people like yourselves with that kind of experience to lead it. From my experience of as a foster parent, somebody in crisis, never in a million years was I prepared I still don't think I'm prepared to hear the kind of traumatic experiences that people come from, to understand and comprehend them. Like, the way it's expressed to me. My personal, I've mentioned this in Parliament many times. One of my boys, I call them my boys, they're like my sons. Literally witnessed another child stabbing another child for the last place on the back of that truck to make his way to safety. We've seen the harrowing stories of people putting their children across barbed wires, hanging onto planes, falling out of midair. There is nobody who wants to put their kids in that position. There is just nobody wants to be in that position themselves, let alone putting their children in that position. So we have to be really, really sensitive that whatever we're doing, how we respond, the needs of those people are at the center of the services that develop, because lots of services will develop. Just like my foster family came out of the Syrian refugee crisis, out of the Afghan refugee crisis, there will be different people that come forward that will start putting services together. And that's brilliant in terms of a response from the community. But we have to stop and think, okay, so when we're doing these responses, we're not the people who are going through that trauma, and what part can we play as people? So is that is it the NGOs lobbying government? Is it that you're writing to your MP to challenge the political decisions? Or is it about what you can do as a member of a community, to whether that's giving an hour of your time every week, whether that's giving a few hours of your time every week, or whether it's providing, supporting lodgings like I did when children were coming over and we had a huge influx of refugees from Afghanistan, and we had a benefit because of the Pashto language, so we were able to provide that. So my on a personal level, it was rewarding, and that was, my children are better for knowing that they have a foster brother and they understand that crisis, and that they have that. It makes them better as human beings. But practically, what can we do? Now, I know from a job position what I'm doing in Parliament here in Bradford. What can we do? Do we support? Do the organisations that are on this call nationally provide infrastructure support to local organisations like the Faith? So Bradford Foundation Trust, and what was the Faith Centre before? Volunteers getting together, going out and meeting having these support groups together. What are the practicalities? So I think at the end of this whole hour, and I can't tell you, you know what your capacity is, but what I am saying is that we have a moral duty. Britain has a moral duty, because as Muslims, there is no conflict between Muslim values, being the best Muslim we can be, to British values. And my worry is that right now, we as Britain have had a hostile environment, a government which is not friendly towards refugees, which is happy to think about creating places in Ascension Island to throw asylum seekers. We've had a janazah only today of a 5-year-old who fell out of a hotel window in Sheffield, who was an Afghan refugee who'd only been in the country less than a couple of weeks. Those are the realities we are faced with. So what do? We know, and I likened this earlier, or in terms of the principle, not the scale. In principle, over the summer, all of us, and I know up and down the country, when we had our crisis, and we still have it with COVID, when it came to free school meals, when it came to supporting our neighbours, everybody stepped up. Bradford stepped up, every city stepped up. We plugged the gaps where the government failed to do it. For example, Marcus Rashford, the free school meals. Now I know that the government is failing to fill the gaps where it concerns refugees. So what do we do as a community? We do what we do best, which is we step up, we step in, and we help and we support, because that is what British values means, is about helping people, is about being a big country, a small country with a big heart, all of those things. And there's no conflict between those values and our Muslim values. So that's what we've got to shine. That's what we've got to show. And we've got to dig deep to be able to do that. And together we will do it. But it's nowhere near what those people are going through. I think I'm going to stop there, because that just gives you an outline of what the challenges are, but they're not small. And it's not just the politicians on their own that are going to do this. We have to work together as a community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Naz. And I think, just to pick on just two things that you've mentioned there, what the government are doing, especially within housing and trying to house the refugees, etc. That's what the government would do. You know, we've got our responsibilities as well. You know, so whether it's like you've said, writing to your government, you know, writing to your local MP or whoever it might be, but there are so many other things that we can do, and I think that point certainly we need to hit home. I want to bring in Neil Jameson, so you know, Director of UK Welcomes Refugees, founder of Citizens UK. I hear you're also a Green Party candidate in London. You've also done lots of civil society projects, including, I think, 2 hands-on projects that you're involved in at the moment down in London. But you're also involved in projects across the world. So Neil, question on you, what your thoughts on what needs to happen now?
Good, thank you very much, and salam alaikum. Thank you very much to Foster Family for inviting me. Nice to be with Shadim again, and with yourself, and with Naz Shah, of course, and a distinguished panel. And I'm grateful for the relationships that we have together, because this indeed is a serious challenge for us. Naz has outlined the pain and the poignancy of the images we see on television. Exactly was the same with Alan Kirby's body, the little boy who was swept up in the Mediterranean, which led to, frankly, the persuasion of David Cameron and the coalition government to take 20,000 Syrians as a result of a image which we could not tolerate. There are so many images already coming out from Afghanistan that we cannot tolerate. So we hope for the same response from civil society and the state, of course. Just as a non-Muslim, I hope there's nothing worse than a non-Muslim trying to lecture Muslims about what the Prophet said, peace be upon him. However, I have been lectured consistently on what the Prophet said about neighborliness. And he said, when pressed, who are my neighbors? He said, it's the 40 houses to the right of you and the 40 houses to the left of you. And when I gather, people said, yes, but the Prophet, who really are our neighbors? And he said, it's the people nearest to you. Of course, he said this at a time when people were spread out across deserts and so on. He basically said they are the people around you. Our neighbors are everywhere, particularly now in a global world. So we must presume that what he meant was neighbors are the people near you, the people far away. And in a global world, we cannot say this has nothing to do with us. In a global world, everything is to do with us, particularly, of course, climate change. That is the worst possible. I don't want to get into that necessarily, but it's the worst possible, but it is the best possible reason for us coming together, because we will all suffer if we don't tackle that terrible threat. However, with the problem and the challenge of the refugees that we see regularly, there is something we can do, and that is called community sponsorship. This is a sort of secret, frankly, that the Home Office has not promoted particularly, but it has agreed to, and it was Theresa May who suggested in 2015, after some of her people went to Canada, that we could follow the example of the Canadians and allow civil society groups to basically shoulder the responsibility for the people that are, at the time, this was the Vietnamese boat people in Canada in 1979, that were looking for refuge. The Canadians for the last 40 years have used community sponsorship and the role of civil society in a magnificent way by getting groups of people to basically receive, raise the money for, house, find houses for the different tides of refugees that have happened over the last 40 years, obviously most recently for the Syrians, and now the Hong Kongers as well, who are fleeing the Chinese Communist Party, but also they've already said they'll take 50,000 Afghans, well above anyone else's target. The reason why UK Welcomes Refugees is interested in this, and that's the purpose of UK Welcomes Refugees, is because it's one way of changing the narrative of the nation. If people know refugees, they're slightly less likely to be rude about them and slightly more likely to think, then what would I do if I was in their situation? Putting yourselves in the slippers, the moccasins of the people you're trying to help is critically important for us all. It's part of the human condition to think, what would I do if I was in that position? And hopefully you would want the neighbors to look out for you. which is why community sponsorship is so important, as well as the fact if everybody was involved in community sponsorship, I think the narrative for this nation, so far as strangers are concerned, so far as refugees are concerned, and frankly, so long as Muslims are concerned, would be much more positive. We don't know each other well enough, but getting to know each other changes the nature of the country. So that's one reason why community sponsorship is very, very important, and one reason why everybody loves Canada, because the Canadians don't sneer about refugees. Maybe there are a few that do, but most of them don't. Certainly the Prime Minister doesn't. And their first reaction to trauma is to help, rather than to build barriers and talk about a few people coming across to the channel in boats and so on. And we do know that the people who come across the channel in boats are not seeking benefits. They're seeking refuge, and they're usually seeking a relationship with their family who are already here, which is why that is important. So if nothing else, in my dwindling years, I do think community sponsorship is one of the major answers to the way this country is going. Narrow, Brexit, breaking away from the neighbors, the European neighbors we've got. And so when something happens like this present tragedy, there's the tendency to say it's nothing to do with us, or it's terrible, but it'll go away. We have to work on the basis it's not going to go away. And frankly, there are things we can do because community sponsorship is possible. The government did successfully, with the help of many people, receive 20,000 Syrians in the last 5 years. It was a very similar, it is almost identical scheme that they've announced we're going to do. We could argue about whether the numbers are right. They're never right, but 20,000 is a challenge, because if you think who's going to do this and you think we've got to do this, then we have to rise to that occasion. Clearly, local authorities have been the first that the Home Office has turned to, which is fair enough, except the local authorities are not in the same position as they were in 2016 when that scheme was launched. They have less money, they have had COVID, they are hard pressed, and they may take some persuasion to do this. However, we do know quite a few local authorities, particularly in the Northwest, are saying, okay, we'll have a go, but we need help, financial help from the government, and that should be available. And as I understand it, there will be financial help for local authorities that do this, depending on the number of people they take. It's not a lot, and it's nothing like the Syrian scheme, which was a 5-year funded scheme, which every year there was money for the local authorities that received people. Along with the local authority, the VPRS scheme, there was a scheme called community sponsorship. This is the junior partner. It's us, brothers and sisters. We didn't rise to the Syrian challenge because we couldn't get enough people to sponsor. Partly it's supposed to be people didn't know about it, but also potentially could be because it does involve quite a bit of hard work, but it's also a privilege to do it. So the same deal is on the table. 20,000 people, local authorities involvement, but will we rise to the occasion of community sponsoring as well? That's the important thing. It needs to be, ideally, it should be 50-50. 50% of the people looked after by agencies through local authority care, and another 50% by you and I. That would be magnificent if we could get there for the Afghans. We never got there with the Syrians. Frankly, of the 20,000 Syrians who have been resettled, about 19,000 were resettled by agencies through the local authorities, and 1,000 were resettled through community sponsor groups. No businesses were involved. We did try to get businesses involved. Businesses can do this. The only NGO that was interested was Amnesty International, and their staff team have sponsored 2 Syrian families. So I begin to finish with really a challenge to the people who are listening in, watching in, which is to think seriously about their mosque, their community group, their sports club, their business, joining the community sponsorship movement. You have to have some money, you've got to be a charity, you've got to find a house, you've got to furnish the house, and then the family are your responsibility. I'm sure that'll be the same responsibility here. You go to the airport, you welcome them from the airport, and they then are effectively your responsibility with the local authority to look after. At the moment, most of the people who've come in through community sponsorship are looked after by Christians. The vast number are looked after by Christians. So far as I know, there is only one mosque, Masjid Al Farouk in Walsall, which is a lead sponsor, which has basically got the money together, found a house and so on. I'm not aware of any others. I know there's been interest in the Muslim community. I know this has the support of the Muslim Council of Britain, but it needs to be much more than that in this instance, effectively, because there is the facility. It's possible to do this. If you want to know more, look at there's an organization called Reset, which is government funded to help people get through the hoops they have to get through. Also, UK Welcomes Refugees is a reasonable website, but certainly contact us if any of the people listening are interested in how do we become a sponsor. So this is not really voluntary work. It's quite grown-up activity because, as I say, the family are your responsibility. If you can't do that, of course, there's other things. You lobby your local authority, wherever you are, to say, why don't we take 10? Why don't we take 20? Yvette Cooper was magnificent the last time, and she is magnificent this time. And she said, okay, with 20,000, if every local authority took 10, that would work brilliantly, because it needs to be shared out amongst local authorities and the 4 nations as well, partly because it's so good for people to have the opportunity to meet and greet and look after. So that's another thing. You need to lobby your local authority to just check what are they going to do. If they say we haven't got any money or we don't know what to do, potentially you could say, well, we'll help you. We won't help you get money, but we want to become a sponsor. We will help you with 1 family, 2 families, 3 families. That immediately changes the nature of the threat, if you like, to a privilege, which frankly, I hope the Muslim community will rise to. You've risen to such traumas in the past. Let's do this together. And as I say, I think it is a solution. It's not, we don't have to wring our hands and think, what are we going to do? Think seriously about sponsoring and think seriously about lobbying a local authority to make sure they have got a position which is ideally positive and will welcome Afghans, because there but for fortune go all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. And certainly what we've in the form, so the form that we've shared with everybody, which is almost a talent pool form, there is an option in there if you want to be involved in community sponsorship, then just tick the box in there. So just to go through some of the other things on there, foster care, supported lodgings, volunteering, and that's physically volunteering with some of the activities that we do, and perhaps some of the other organizations on here would be doing, mentoring refugees or unaccompanied asylum seekers. There's also a need for ESOL teachers or English as additional language support, transportation support, donations, financial support, property rental support, advocacy, legal support, campaigning, and even marketing support. So all of these, are on the list. And also, if there are any other skills, so if you've got a skill set or a talent that you want us to know about, that perhaps might be useful to help the situation, then of course just add it in there as well, and that would be really, really useful. Thanks once again, Neil. That was really, really useful. I think it reminds me of time when my mother got together with some of her friends to try and sponsor, a Syrian refugee to come and settle into the UK. And it was slightly different to community sponsorship, like you've described it. But certainly, I think if she'd known about that, how it worked, if I'd known how it worked as you've described it there, perhaps it would be something that we would have done at the time, but it's it's time now. Obviously, the urgency is now with the people coming through from Afghanistan. I'm just going to slightly change the next speaker. I know Nargis, you were to go up next, but Zara, I think if I bring you in now, you're Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, the first female to be in that position. You yourself come from a law background. And also, it's great to see that you're a strong advocate of this kind of work that we do, and certainly you've spoken a lot about the importance of fostering and Muslims stepping up to actively getting involved, not just with money, which go to charities abroad. But Zara, how are you seeing what's unfolding now, and what would yourself and perhaps the Muslim Council of Britain like to see what happens here in the UK now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Definitely very humbled to be amongst so many distinguished panelists, and lovely to see some of you, very familiar faces. I think, this week I've spent speaking to members of the Afghan community, those coordinating, facilitating response, as well as those on the back end of what's going on. And there's a high amount of uncertainty, of fear, and also of confusion as to what is going to be happening next. And I think this is where it's so critical for our institutions, for ourselves, to really play a role in leadership, in really championing, and I guess taking on the challenge of what is coming next. Because I think we've had so much experience from our history where there's been conflict and diasporas of refugees, predominantly Muslims, coming here, where we haven't quite been ready to fulfill that need. And I think, many of the panelists have touched upon that. More recently was a Syrian example. Many Syrian refugees, and myself being from Scotland, they were sent to the Isle of Bute, where there's no halal food and no Muslims, and they just were kind of made to do what they had to do. But what we've also seen is how refugee communities can really flourish. And I think the real opportunity is investing in the change makers of the future. And I think what really makes this critical is that in our absence and in our inability to facilitate the opportunities, the support, and even just the commitment to people's religious obligation, just being able to provide people support to be Muslim, in a very challenging and testing environment, is that we don't allow those future communities to flourish. We don't allow people to be who they are. And I think it really is down to our institutions. We all have a role to play in making sure, because otherwise we're going to see, we're already facing challenges around Islamophobia and xenophobia, but certainly with so much going on now, we don't know how this is going to play out in the kind of international side and the implications for us as British Muslims. It's so important for us to act and to make sure that families get the best chance. But what is it that they're all looking for? All these different things we're offering are great, but really they're looking for the feeling of home and the feeling of belonging, and quite poignantly, the feeling of family, which is, so fitting of my foster family. And that is what people are looking for. So I think it's really down to us as, and especially as the MCB, to ask ourselves the same question, which is, how can we provide them a sense of family? How can we provide them places now that will support them through some of the toughest times of their lives, but also to build these future leaders, maybe of our communities, of our institutions, and to really bring that mix together. Because I think as we're going on, there's still plenty of agendas, plenty of Islamophobia, the counterterrorism narrative. We don't know how the politics of this is going to play out. When I spoke to, one of the Afghani community leaders, he said to me, Zara, the worst thing about all of this is the people that have lost the most are the Afghani people themselves. It's 40 years of war, and we've just been left. Everybody's come in, done what they needed to do, and they've left us, and we don't have anything else. And this is just about survival for us now. And I said, well, what do you want us to do? He said, please make clear the cause of the people. He said, we don't want it to be, there's so many things that the news is focusing on, but we can't forget the plight of the people, and they're waiting for us to help them now and to do our bit. So I'll probably end there and not take up too much time, but I think certainly now is the time for us to provide that support, first that commitment, but also to have that mindset that this is our family, all over. This is our family, it's our ummah. We have to take responsibility, but do so with an energy and a passion and a zeal, because at the end of the day, we have the prophetic tradition. It's part of our Islamic duty. But surely, if we were in that same position, we would want someone not just to treat us as, survivors, but equal partners in making a better future for British Muslims, inshallah. So thank you so much, Shakib and Shadim and the whole team, for inviting me today.
Thank you, Zara. And I think, yes, we're going to try and put the word out. We'd like to share this on social media. So if everyone's okay, if you were happy to put your camera on and just smile, I think what we'll try and do is we'll try and take a screenshot at this point. So if everyone would like to do that, and we'll try and get as many people as possible on here. And I might ask Shadim to kind of help me if you're around. I can only see, I think, a third of the people on my screen. And only a third of those people that I could see are actually smiling. So I think if we were to all smile, I think that makes it a better thing to go out on social media. But thank you. I'm doing that now. And we might try and do that later on as well if we can. Thank you, Zara. Certainly, this needs to go far and wide. There are a couple of questions that are coming in about in terms of housing and support that perhaps local authorities might provide. But we'll try and come to those questions. I think we've got a couple of other speakers. We'll come to those questions towards the end if we can. Nargis, I'm going to bring you in now. I think it's quite important to hear some lived experience. So Nargis Kayumi, we're grateful to have Nargis on our team at My Foster Family. She's joined us as the engagement officer. Her email is in the chat if anybody would like to connect with us. Nargis comes from a refugee family, also from Afghanistan. And I think, it would be good to hear your words, Nargis, around, your lived experience, but also, what really needs to happen and what kind of support is most needed.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and share my experience. I feel a bit nervous now because everyone's come on board and said some really, really important things. And I really want to be able to narrow down and focus, I suppose, my bit a little bit more to what some of us here might be feeling is actually the problem is huge. And I get that feeling. I've been through it, I've experienced it, and now I'm in many ways supporting it as best as I can. So I wanna be able to, I suppose, lower some of those anxieties. So I came into the UK seeking asylum with my family back in 2001. And we came from Afghanistan having lived a life that was very lavish. My dad had a car business, which was very successful in Afghanistan and in Russia. And when the Taliban had taken over, one of the things that they would do is seize all properties and any businesses that were very, very well known. And unfortunately, my family were in the midst of all of that, and we sought asylum in Scotland, in Glasgow, in 2001, September 2001. And we didn't come through the various programs that were available. We came through the typical ways that you hear on the news that refugees seek asylum in the UK, which is through boats, which is through lorries, holding your breath so that the breathing detector doesn't detect any sign of life in the lorries, and that was my lived experience as an 9-year-old young person with my brother. At that time, my mum was pregnant. She was pregnant with my sister, and when we sought refuge into the UK, I think for us the biggest challenge, so to say, was the fact that community was missing. The sense of community was missing, the sense of familiarity was missing. There was nothing that felt the same. Not only did we lose everything that we owned, we lost a sense of identity, a sense of belonging, and we didn't know where to go to access all of that would make us feel as though we were at home. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing that's kind of stuck. Because when we were in Scotland, you did see very much white faces. When I would go to a bank, I didn't see a person of any colour that would make me feel as though I had an ability to build a future where I was now to live forever. And in 2008, we moved to London. And at that point, my family dynamic did break down, and I ended up being in care from the age of 17. And I think when I reflect on it now, a lot of our experience, a lot of the trauma and the expectation that was then sort of almost held down upon the children and the family was unbearable. It was difficult, and the impact of that was family breakdown. And what I think has really stuck to me is that should we have had support at the early stage where this was acknowledged, where people were welcoming, where people understood that we were hardworking people, that we sought refuge for safety reasons, not because we didn't have the skills or the means to be able to make a life. We very much had those skills. And I think that's the perception that you're fed through media, even till this day. And we need to break down that narrative, because that's not the case for most people seeking asylum. We do have skills, and you've got to remember that. And the thing that seems to be missing is being able to support refugees where they feel comfortable enough to go out and be able to reintegrate into community and reuse some of those skills that they've already got in order to be able to make something out of it in this new home that's going to be their forever home. That's been my experience in terms of my journey into the UK. Obviously, I am care experienced. I've been in care in a residential home for about a year. And I then went on to foster my sister, who was 13. And at that time, I was aged 21. In that experience, I went on to successfully foster my sister. But again, within that experience, my sister's supervising social worker was not for me fostering my sister, because I was young, because I was still under the leaving care team, because I was still in education. And I feel, again, that experience for me, what it struck was that people didn't understand the resilience that that someone like myself, who has seen life at its worst, can bring into the table. And I think that really struck me, that people thought it was impossible because everything was stacked against me. And ultimately, it was the judge who made the court decision for my sister to be under my care, because I was the only family member who was able to commit and care for her. And alhamdulillah, she's still with me. She's 19 and she's looking to move on to her own flat. So again, that's been a success story. I've recently graduated as a master's student in social work. And I think for me, the reason why I went on into masters was because for me, social work was the most familiar aspect of my life. And it's been the most eye-opening experience of my life. And so I've continued to foster. I've gone into mainstream fostering. And my role within my foster family is to engage with as much care experienced people, adopters, foster carers, and support them in their role as best as I can by sharing my story, by being able to platform their voices, because there are important voices that need to be heard. And I think what I want to close with is, I know some of us in here will think that the problem is really big, but actually being able to step in, mentor, guide, show your support in terms of your local community on how you can hold hand by hand and support the families that are coming through the UK borders, and support them with the basics. Let's start with the basics. Some of us will have the skills to make change politically. Some of us will have the skills to make change in our community. Some of us can make those changes directly with these families. And I think that's the angle that I want to pitch to you guys here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nargis. And there are comments coming through to me, mashallah, from Nazneen. Nargis is amazing. May Allah bless her immensely. I mean, and honestly, we are privileged to have you on our team. And certainly one of the things that we really need to be doing now is to push forward those success stories like yourself, and that success story of, what you've been through and where you are now, and the fact that, you're actually going above and beyond. A very touching story. Thank you, Saha. A very touching story. And from Shella, bless you, Nargis. So just wanted to share some of those comments there. But thank you once again, Nargis, for sharing that with us. Jahangir, I'm going to bring you in. I know Jahangir Malik, Chair at National Emergencies Trust. I think it was until recently. You also were, I believe, until last year, a CEO at Muslim Aid. You've got lots of different roles that you've got under your belt and done. Now, I believe you're with us at Mercy Mission as Director of Policy. So in your assessment, and of course, I believe you've been there on the ground in Afghanistan as well. Are we moving in the right direction here, Jahangir?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Shakib, for the introduction. And when I listen to Nargis's story, I'm filled with hope and inspiration. 20 years ago, this month, this week, I was in Kandahar leading a humanitarian effort, and I've been a humanitarian pretty much most of my life in different parts of the world. And I've witnessed and participated in trying to support with the generosity of the communities, Muslim community and the wider community, in supporting those people in their place of origin, in their places of birth. And I've seen the trauma that people like Nargis and others have come from, and the conflict that they've fled, that the trauma that they carry, and the resilience, as Nargis says, has built into their system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed them with to be able to be a part of that journey and moving forward. So after about 20 years of doing humanitarian work, I recognize that little or insufficient attention has been paid to when people arrive into our country and the kind of community support that's needed. So overall, I think, one, we recognize the concept of ummah, the concept of humanity, the compassion, the generosity, as witnessed by all our communities in responding to crises around the globe. But I think what we now are looking at is a focus on continuing that rich tradition of support and our continued effort to those that arrive onto our shores here. I think it's a fact that I'd like to sort of highlight here is that 86% of refugees are supported by neighboring countries. So the overwhelming support is done by neighboring countries, whether it was in Pakistan or Turkey in terms of the refugees in those particular areas. And the few that are fortunate enough to make it into our local areas here in the United Kingdom and our shores, we have a great sense of responsibility and a need to be able to fulfill, to ensure that we are welcoming, as in experienced by understood by our faith tradition, our scripture, our prophetic model, and the way that displaced people from Mecca to Medina and what the prophetic model of Medina looked like when they were settling in communities. And Mercy Mission has a rich tradition of trying to ensure that we play that role. And I'm sure Azim, the CEO, will be touching upon some of this after myself. But what I'm sort of focusing on at this moment in time is that what is our role and responsibility? How do we strengthen our offer and our support to the 20,000 or so refugees that will be arriving on our shores over the next coming weeks, months, and years? Mercy Mission previously helped in Lesbos and supported in difficult times, which was a political football at the time, in terms of the refugees arriving in Greece, by providing legal support and advocacy through resettlement, through youth empowerment. And this has been a really challenging one, because I think, again, our tradition has been that we have a rich history of supporting people at source, but we have a little bit more of a challenging mindset in terms of helping those that arrive closer to our shores, both politically and in the UK, because we feel that we have a state structure that will provide that support. And as Neil has so eloquently stated, that 19,000 of the 20,000 Syrian refugees were supported by local authorities, but we're in a very, very different state of mind or state at this moment in time with local authorities. Now, I'm just going to touch upon a little, if we draw back on the last year and a half, I've been involved with the coordination of the voluntary and community sector's efforts to the pandemic. And if we recognize the pandemic has brought us closer together. The pandemic has demonstrated the power and the impact of civil society. And a report that Mercy Merchant has supported in recent times was something with the Good Faith Partnership. And that Good Faith Partnership created a report called published a report called Stepping Up and Stepping Out. This report highlighted the enormous contribution of faith-based organizations of civil society to the pandemic. And I think we recognized that across our country and across our communities, how civil society, statutory bodies, local authorities, and state have come together in ensuring that the most vulnerable in our society, the needs were met and that they were supported. Now, I think this demonstrates that it is possible, it is doable, and how we've been able to come together. Now, another report that I'd just like to highlight here was called Keeping the Faith, published early this year with the APPG on Faith and Society. And this was demonstrating the partnership between, and this is a kind of an important point that I'd like to sort of demonstrate here, but an important partnership between faith groups and local authorities during and beyond the pandemic. So we've illustrated by the last 18 months the power and the value add of faith-based organizations that are rooted and anchored in the community and to play a critical role. And here, I think a sort of looking forward into a future model, I think we look at our own faith tradition, and especially within our Muslim tradition, we look at a prophetic model. And Azim and I have been discussing a model which kind of resembles what the Prophet, peace be upon him, would do in a situation like what we're facing ourselves in modern Britain. And we're looking at a concept called the faith in our city, in which that we would sort of illustrate and support how we help the most vulnerable in our society. And we're currently faced with a situation in which that our offering our support to the incoming refugees, as we've done over the last few years for the Syrian refugees. Now, the Afghan refugees and refugees that are coming from different parts of the world, I think I would like to highlight sort of 4 main points that I think are important as we move into this agenda. Firstly, that as is the theme throughout this session, that we really open our hearts and we open our faith-based community assets. That's our mosques, our Islamic organizations, our programs, our initiatives, and we befriend, we welcome and support refugees and asylum seekers. We sort of gear ourselves to an understanding of the needs of refugees and asylum seekers and enable us to do our level best to make sure that they feel welcome. And the prophetic model, of course, of mosques and Islamic centers and community centers has never ever been just a place of prayer, but a place in which that people find sanctuary, people find comfort, and that we play a role of support as people have gone through a huge amount of difficult times and trauma. So we provide spiritual and practical sanctuary for these people through our mosques, community-based centers, and facilities that are dotted across the country. Secondly, we create a UK asylum and refugee / resettlement fund. Funding is an issue. It will be a challenge as the local authorities our funds are depleted. So we're going to have to look at a community-based financial safety net for the most vulnerable in our society. And so that in the event that people have applied for their asylum and they're only on £40 a month, we all know that refugee organizations have said that's way not enough to be able to meet their basic needs. And we don't want that to be a mechanism for people to fall into the cracks of society. And so we need to look at Islamic financial instruments such as zakat and waqf. And I'm sure again my dear colleague Azim will be delving into this a bit more, but we need to look at financial instruments and mechanisms to support refugees and asylum seekers within our communities. Third, to strengthen Muslim civil society infrastructure to better connect into regional and local statutory bodies. Regional and local statutory bodies will be responsible for the housing and the settling of the refugees. And so therefore we need to be able to ensure that we're adequately connected. And again, going back to our experiences in the pandemic, we've shown how we have improved our connectedness, but there's still a long way to go in ensuring that our mosques and infrastructure are sufficiently connected into local authorities to be able to do that. Last and not least is that we need to be able to be sufficiently mobilized to influence policy. At the moment, we do have we are facing a hostile environment. This term that I really despise, a hostile environment, which is making it difficult for asylum seekers and refugees and making it very, very challenging to enable people who are fleeing conflict and fleeing difficult times in their country of origin to arrive into our shores and to be able to come into the country, to be able to play, to be able to ensure that we welcome them. And currently there is what's termed as an anti-refugee bill called the Nationality and Borders Bill, which is going through the House at this moment in time, which needs to be challenged itself. Refugee organizations are counting on our support as communities to be able to ensure that we are influencing policy, but we will not be able to influence policy unless we are organized and we are welcoming, we are supporting the refugees and asylum seekers that are entering into our country, and to be able to provide that commission. To conclude, we need to establish a compassionate society in which that we know what we want to build and we know that what we need to support. And we as a Muslim community should ensure that we are at the heart of that, building stronger communities, influencing decision-making that can help transform the rights of refugees and migrant communities, and really ensure that we do not leave them isolated, vulnerable, alienated, and feeling like they're on their own. That will be the worst and the complete opposite of our prophetic tradition and the opposite of what's expected of us. And so, as in the report has said, stepping up and stepping out, it's our time to once again ensure that we play our part, to come together and ensure that, inshallah, by God's grace and our communal coordinated efforts, we play a role in which that will enable us to be worthy of our tradition.
Yes, Jazakallah khair, Jahangir, inshallah. And that's exactly what we intend to be. That's our, looking back at the Ansar in Medina as they stood up and did what they needed to do. That, as you said, is in our tradition. Just wanted everybody to know the session is planned to end at 6:30. And we've extended it. I think originally our usual Foster Friday goes on until 5 to 6, but we've extended this session in order to accommodate any questions that people might have. A number of the panel members will remain for the duration so that they can hopefully answer some of your questions around the topic. So Azim, now I think you're the only remaining panel member we haven't heard from, chair of NZF, National Zakat Foundation Worldwide, founder of many projects that have come out of Mercy Mission, including our own My Foster Family, and obviously going back to zakat as a way of purifying oneself. What is your current assessment of the situation? What needs to happen?
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. I guess I'm a bit more optimistic, I would say. I think, just following on from my colleague Jahangir earlier, I think we've got to be really proactive, and like Jahangir was suggesting, let's look at what we can do and let's not get lost in all the problems. Yeah, there is a lot of issues, but at the same time, this is happening at a time when the Muslim community, I don't think, has been in a better position, right? So we're strong in numbers. We've started to see infrastructure emerge. We've got amazing parliamentarians like Naz and others that are genuinely trying to make a change and champion the rights of people that are often forgotten. So I'm looking at this as a trustee at the National Zakat Foundation. We are the UK's largest domestic zakat collector. We're really proud to serve our payers who trust us with their zakat, and our job is to get it out in the best way possible. So for me, it's like, this is a good opportunity for us to really show what we as a British Muslim community are made of, to invest hard, to invest bigger and better than ever before, to raise the expectation from survival to experience and success. Like I really enjoyed hearing from Nargis and seeing just the progress that she and her family have made, and just at such a young age to be so confident and involved in civil society. We should be proud of that. Like I'm really excited. I look forward to working with Nargis and other people that are ready to serve, and they're ready to put down whatever resources they've got to go ahead and welcome these people. I look at this from the simple fact, my father was a refugee. My father is 85 years old. He fled he fled India in a very difficult time, and he's got the worst of all stories of fleeing as a young boy and seeing far too much death and devastation. But he also has the story of being a migrant and arriving in the UK. And to be honest, it seems like it was a lot better 50 years ago than it is now in terms of the response that they got. But I really find there's so much knowledge to be taken from, you know, our lived experiences, you know, people like Nargis and those that came before. Let's just mobilize and create great opportunities. The National Zakat Foundation is here. We're ready. We're a Zakat fund, so we'll be providing financial assistance to all those that are eligible and seek to acquire that. So my first and biggest shout out is to say that the 40 odd people here that are involved in their communities, when they find out and there's people that need financial assistance, just tell them to get in touch with NZF. That's what we're here for. We are here to make sure that those people that need financial assistance and they're eligible, they get it. That's what we're here to do. And at the same time, those of you who are, thinking like, well, how do I play a stronger role? Well, first and foremost, figure out what your own infrastructure is able to do. At NZF, we'll take your zakat and we'll make sure it works in your local community. Like Jangir said, look at your local mosque, take advantage of existing infrastructure. Sometimes when we see a new problem, we think, all right, we need to come up with something brand new. I think sometimes we just need to use better what we've already got. We've got some amazing mosques up and down this country. Shout out to an organizer like the Green Lane Mosque in Birmingham, for example, which really, it's an inspirational place where, they've really led the way in community sponsorship in their local community. I know the guys there, they'd seen some of Neil's work and other people that were involved in community sponsorship. They didn't complain about it. They didn't think, oh, we can't do this. They just raised a team. They went ahead. Mashallah, 2 Syrian families they've supported. They're getting ready to apply for another one. But it's a mosque that's been there many, many years. So my message is one of, let's be really positive, guys. Let's really show the new arrivals what we're made of. Let's use our existing infrastructure. Let's make sure people have a better experience than those that have come before. We know the Syrians had a tough time. We know the Bosnians had a much tougher time before that. But it's got a little bit better every time. Let's just make sure this next one is a testimony to what we're achieving in terms of, our businesses, our schooling, our parliamentarians, our just the contribution we currently have to civil society. Let's make sure we can utilize that for this next cohort of people and not have any pity. I think I really like Nargis's point that just recognize these are ordinary people. I'm sure most of them will be super smart people with lots to offer. Just figure out how you can work with them to get going. And I just want to finish on a very simple point almost, and returning back to as my colleague Jangir was saying, reflecting on prophetic tradition, that our final prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that he had this wonderful idea of muwaqqa, where he would bring together people from diverse communities. So in his context, it was people that were arriving from Mecca into Medina, and he would just join them together as what we would, I'd say today, call buddies, right? But he essentially created a buddy system, and it's a simple but wonderful thing that was super successful. And I don't know how, all I'm saying is, from an NZF perspective, we're happy to make sure we can provide financial assistance to those that need it, that are arriving. And we would welcome other people to say, well, maybe we can help. Let's say you can reach out to your local masjid and say, look, let's create a buddy system, and you can be there when Afghan new arrivals come. And then if that person needs any help, you can go to NZF and hopefully apply for some financial assistance. And if they meet our criteria, we'll make sure we get it to them. But let's make something live, positive, move out of survival mode and move into enterprise, and engagement. Because from my experience of people of Afghan heritage, super smart, super resilient, super agile, and have no interest in charity and more interest in, just getting to the market and trading and not to belittle it, but making like awesome food and really good with craft work and technology and fintechs, like all this great stuff we're seeing. Why let's not leave this in a G4S accommodation. Let's make sure it comes out, and I'm not sure if I was allowed to say that, but in some government accommodation. But let's make sure this is something that's really really positive. And those people that are on the call that want to get involved, fill out the form that MFF are going to send out. And from what I understand, Saqib and the team, they're going to try and sift through and direct people in different ways. But my main takeaways, and I thank Jangir for that, is let's use existing infrastructure and let's empower it and make sure it's stronger and better able to deal with those that are coming, rather than trying to rethink a new way of doing things. We've got great infrastructure. Let's just use it better.
Azim, thank you very much. and yeah, just so what I've done there also in the chat for everybody is I've shared that Zakat application form from NZF. You know, if anybody needs it for anyone that they need to apply that for. Also, the form has been shared a number of times. I think about a third of the people on this meeting today have filled it in so far. So if you haven't filled it in, please do fill it in. I think it's just worth mentioning again that, you know, what Neil mentioned earlier, businesses, not so many have come forward. So if you are part of a business and if you're part of an organization, there is a little question in there where you can mention what organization, and so we can get that business to business or to organization level work happening as well. Naeem, you've got your hand up, so I'm going to come now to questions. We've got about 20 minutes, and we've allowed this time for any questions on the topic. Jonathan, I know you also had a question earlier as well, but I'll come to you, Naeem, first. So go ahead, Naeem, the floor is yours. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Wonderful work, and may Allah bless everybody successful in this endeavor. I'm an academic from US. I've already performed as well, and I am working with many organizations in Pakistan and also in other regions of the world. And predominantly, I bring them those refugees who just older ones, which are really struggling and getting into education from their own. And I help them with my infrastructure, with my program that I have it. I would love to have somebody reach out to me. We can reach out to these students who'll be coming to UK. I'm in US or anywhere else. I mean, I'm teaching students in Rohingya students. It's a creative program. It is not something, okay, go and learn this. It is a predominantly a program which brings them to, for example, in UK, O-level and A-level studies, make them learn, understand, and do things that they need to do for the assessment, the upcoming assessments. So it is not something, okay, let me teach this child how to write. No, it is taking him to the Zenth level where they need to be, where they want to be, and where they should be. So happy to help in that area. And
thank you. And Naeem, you know, it's exactly that sort of. I come from a teacher background, 16 years in education. I was an assistant principal, and also, you know, and I know, having been involved in, you know, My Foster Family and now Project in Arise Learning, the kind of work that we've done on the ground with Bradford Foundation Trust, you know, with you know, a number of different organizations, including Barnardo's. You know, we've done some great work, and there's been a great many success stories that we've shared, you know, and on our Twitter we've put some of those up. But there's still certainly a lot that needs to be done. Jonathan, you had a question earlier. Would you like to unmute and ask that question?
Yeah, I was talking from someone who, I apologize. Salami Com, I apologize, said that wrong. I'm just speaking as someone who views the current situation. Anyone wants out of Afghanistan, who's helped Western forces, who feels injured now should be allowed out. What is Bradford Council offering, or the multi-faith organisation offering, to actually get those people out of Afghanistan and into the community that would make them feel safe?
Okay, Jonathan, I think your question was directed to, was it Bradford Council, if I'm correct, if I understood it. And I think maybe perhaps that, I'm not sure if anybody here might be able to answer a question on behalf of Bradford Council, but certainly on behalf of what we can do here in terms of what we've heard from the various speakers, what I'd suggest is, if you fill in the form, if there is something that you'd like to get involved in, I don't know, maybe Naz, if you're aware of some things within Bradford West that are happening, is there anything that you could perhaps say in answer to that?
So we are a city of sanctuary in Bradford. Where Bradford is a city of sanctuary, and we've got lots of people coming in, and I have had a briefing from our chief exec, and I think they're having further meetings over the next few days because it is a developing situation and there are negotiations happening. So lots of councils have been putting forward and making representations to government doing their assessments of how many, what we can do immediately, what we can do in the long term and the short term. And that's been worked up with local partnership organisations. And I think with Bradford Foundation Trust and the key role that Bradford Foundation Trust has played in the past with the asylum seekers and refugees, I think they'll be engaged in those discussions. But if you, again, just reiterating what you've said, it should be people need to fill the forms in. If you have that interest, if your interest is, look, we want to, this is what we can provide. First of all, you need to assess what you want to do, how much you can do, and then how to do it. And that way, Bradford Foundation Trust can coordinate that and come back to individual people to say, look, this is what's out there, this is how you can get involved, and then move forward, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, Naz, that was really useful. So just a couple more other questions. Shadim, would you like to come in? I know you're on the call. You are the CEO. You were supposed to be hosting this. It would be wrong of me not to bring you in at this point. So thank you for joining us. Over to
thank
you.
you so much, Saqib, and thank you for taking this on and doing such a great job of welcoming everyone. And it was great to hear everyone's contributions. I just wanted to reiterate what Naz was saying in response to Jonathan's question, that Bradford has already resettled some of the families from Afghanistan, and Bradford Foundation Trust were involved in that dialogue with the council and City of Sanctuary and other people. So, here in Bradford, we do have quite an established array of organisations in the VCS sector, faith sector, that are well connected and well supportive. I think the challenges is what the ambition is for government, and what they're willing to take on. But I feel on a local level, we're very well equipped and resourced as a collaborative to respond to the needs of new arrivals. And as you've mentioned, Naz kindly mentioned Bradford Foundation Trust, we've played quite an instrumental role in supporting refugees and asylum seekers for many years, and National Zakat Foundation is one of our partners. So when new arrivals come into the city, we are able to assist them in many ways, shapes and forms. So for us, what we want to try to do is take our experience as an organization and what we've done and be able to share that with other organizations as well. So if there's other towns and cities where there may not be such an established network, then we hope we can share that learning. So as mentioned earlier, if there's any organizations out there that wish to have that sort of support and help, then we'd be more than happy to collaborate with them as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Shadim. And again, there is a part on the form where you can just add in your organization details. There is a question, Rana, you've got your hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yep, thanks. Just first of all, I'm just really pleased that obviously people have come together at such a crucial time and in such a short time frame. And my question is around the trauma aspect and support that's offered to, obviously we're talking a lot about housing and the practical aspects, which are really important, but I mean, there's a number of organisations here, both on the panel and those attending. Can we commit as a collective, and maybe, I don't know whether MCB or the National Zakat Foundation could take a lead on this, in coordinating a response and a collective of both organisations and individuals who are therapists that can provide trauma support. So either that's whether they're commissioned by local authorities. So I currently work for a CVS in Greater Manchester, and we're looking for a charity that can provide this. So there will be organisations and local authorities that will fund this, but on a wider scale, is there obviously individuals that can support this as well? Because I think it's a really crucial aspect of the long-term effects of resettlement that sometimes is overlooked.
Yeah. And thank you for that question. Is it Rana? Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that might be a question that would be perhaps good for yourself. In fact, any of you, Azim or Jahangir or Shadim, would like to
I can come in there, Saqib. I'm not sure, Rana, if you've heard of or come across an organization called Better Communities Business Network. So they've done some excellent work looking at mental health issues from a Muslim youth perspective, you know, and that's one of the things that they identified, is that there is sort of many gaps in service providers. And I am going to share in the chat for you, Rana, there is a survey that they've recently put out, but they are trying to gather more information, and I'll also share a link to their research. So yeah, hopefully if we have a similar need here in Bradford when we're engaging with asylum seekers and refugees. We know that there's a lot of trauma involved, and we need the right type of professional support and networks around them to give them the best possible support. So I will share that in the chat, Saqib, for Rana and anyone else.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and you know, there's been a comment asking for you know, contacts to be shared. I think, you know, it's a fair point. You know, if you know what I'll ask everybody actually is, Nargis has shared her contact out there, and you know, if you do fill in the form, we're going to put you in touch with those organizations. But those who are able to, thank you, Shadim, just shared the BCBN information there as well. Okay, so any other questions around the topic or what we need to do? I think, you know, Sheikh Usman, you've joined us as well, and as a faith advisor for My Foster Family, especially seeing that we're dealing with people who are coming here struggling, as we've heard from Nargis' story, struggling with their faith sometimes. You know, where does that sit in our priority as Muslims in terms of helping people with their faith, and also helping people just with their lives and just trying to live?
Jazakallah, assalamu alaikum. I want to thank all the contributors so far, but I kind of sort of want to highlight one point which has been outlined both by Jahangir and Brother Azim Kidwai, in terms of being practical and optimistic. Life is full of challenges generally, but when we look at the example of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he himself was a migrant when he left Makkah Mukarramah and sought refuge in Medina Munawwara. So the trauma that he went through, and his family members, and indeed, you know, members of his family prior to the migration to Medina, is there, you know, and we have it in our rich resource in terms of scripture and history, Sirah, and the Quran and Sunnah, and you know, we owe a debt of gratitude to our academics for, you know, to have sort of captured and preserved that. But I think the time now is more important than ever that we kind of take it away from the bookshelf and in the recesses of knowledge, and see how we can bring the teachings and the values and the challenges faced by people you know, fleeing from one place and making another place their permanent resident at the grassroots. And I'm a resource through the help of Brother Shadim and Brother Saqib, to be a resource both for My Foster Family and my adoption family internally, but also to prospective fosterers and adopters. And one of the key things that we want to sort of achieve is to break the barrier that exists between organizations such as My Foster Family and others, and faith and community leadership, particularly within the Muslim community. It's a challenge, but we need to be optimistic rather than you know, be bogged down with the details and the hurdles that might be put in our way. So I think the way forward is being proactive and engaging, and trying to emulate the teachings that are there in our scriptural resources into practical life, and you know, that is there already for us. And it's really, really encouraging to see Sister Nargis and others that have made UK their life, and you know, how they've grown and how they've contributed to society and people around them. And there are many, many models, like it's been said, you know, people from Afghanistan are into, like Hazrat Abdurrahman ibn Auf, when he was asked about whether he wanted to marry a local lady from Medina, he said, just show me the way to the market. And the wealth that Allah gave him, he used that for the sake of deen. So each one has something to offer. And we need to seek that out and capitalize on that. And at My Foster Family, we are here to be that link, that gel, that social glue for all the practitioners and the community in this respect of helping individuals and families resettle in the UK.
Thank you, Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. Thank you for those words. Probably come to the last question, and then I think I'm going to hand over to a few of our panelists just to close, and any closing words. So Salman, last question from yourself. Is it Salman Nazari? If you'd like to unmute yourself, go ahead, please. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Shakib, sorry. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunities. So my name is Salman Nazari, and I'm based in Bradford. I'm one of the child as a foster care that as a 13 years old teenage, I fled Afghanistan because of the war, and I've traveled on my own, and I've feared for my life. It was one of the most difficult and challenging things I had to do at such a young age, and no child should go through that. It's a long story. How I came. When I arrived in the UK, I was 14 years old, and I'm so grateful for Bradford communities and Bradford social services that accept me as a foster child. And it's one of those things, long story that it takes long, and I'm sorry I joined late. The question is how can I bring the Afghan communities into community sponsors, sponsorship that you guys were talking about, so we can actually join together and to support these Afghan refugees that are coming to this country.
Thank you, Salman, for that question. And also, Salman, I think you've reached out to us, and that's fantastic. Do drop us an email. Do get in touch with us. Shadim, is there anything you'd like to say to Salman in answer to what we can do as My Foster Family?
I'd like to direct that question to Nargis, actually, because Nargis is in the middle of putting together something on that. So
true.
Over to you, Nargis.
Over to you, Nargis.
So as mentioned previously, I'm the engagement officer with My Foster Family, and within my role, I think one of the things that is still missing within the care experience community is sort of joining the lives of Muslim children in care. And I think a lot of children in care do lose a sense of their identity. This is a very well-known fact. But what about those children who come from war-torn countries, who are placed with non-Muslim families, who don't have that sense of community because they've been torn away from their family? So I think one of the biggest things that we need to achieve within My Foster Family is actually platforming care experience people's voices, especially those from the Muslim background, because what our care experience people are missing currently is similar faces to them. When I was in care, I didn't know anyone like me. I didn't know anyone who had dark hair. I didn't know anyone who had olive skin, and I didn't know that there was a small part of the community that would accept me. And I think when we can show that there are people like us, who look like us, talk like us, and dress like us, to those people to those care experienced people who are living, who are experiencing what we had previously experienced, is very important. And we need to be able to create a platform, a safe space where that can take place. That was quite wordy, but yeah, definitely, please do get in touch, because the only way we can achieve such a platform is to have care experienced people on board from those backgrounds, who can provide that mentorship, who can provide that guidance, and who can come to that safe space to have those communications, to tell people who would understand their position what it is that they're struggling, because until we can platform these voices, we won't fully understand what our young people are struggling with. And like the points that have already been touched, the trauma that we carry is lifelong. We learn to live with it, and some of us learn to live with it, and that's very evident. But some of us do struggle, and we can't ignore that. And part of creating such a platform will enable us to create that sense of community, that sense of safe space, that support network that is very much missing in general from the care experience community, nonetheless from the Muslim care experience community.
Nargis, honestly, thank you very much. You know, I think if we were to have like final words, that would probably be some really, really good final words, what you've just given us there, because that's exactly what this has all been about from the beginning. Shadim, I know you weren't hosting, and you've joined us, and you know, we do make dua for your aunt who's also you've just buried her, and the janazah just happened today. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You know, it would be good maybe to end on some du'as. I know we've gone over by a couple of minutes. Would you like to say any few final words, Shadim, from yourself, and then maybe Sheikh, it would be good just to do a final ending du'a?
Yeah, I think for me, as for the way my day went today, that, you know, they say they can plan and we can plan, but Allah is the best of all planners, you know, and nothing is, you know, we're not in full control of, you know, what is going on, but what we can do is make our best effort and put our right foot forward and do it with the right intention, you know. And when this event was planned, literally I think it's 36 hours since we started this conversation about doing this event. It was done with the right intention, alhamdulillah, to try to support vulnerable brothers and sisters and those who we felt that needed a place of sanctuary and a familiar home or a person to talk to and listen to and share their griefs and support them in a positive way to look forward. So for me, I feel that if we have the right intentions and we come forward like this, then it will create a momentum and more people will connect to this. And inshallah, we will certainly make a difference. So yeah, it'd be great to hear some final words from Sheikh, and I think we can end it there, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Saqib, and all the speakers.
Jazakallah khair to you too, and everybody else. Sheikh, just before your final dua, I just wanted to remind everybody that the form that we sent out, you know, that form is a launch platform, you know, for this kind of engagement. So if you haven't filled it in, please do fill it in. You know, we are working across with different organizations to get this done in the best way possible. Sheikh Usman, can I now hand over to you for the final dua and the conclusion? Jazakallah khair.
Jazakumullah. It's going to be a very short dua, but before we make the dua, we just remind ourselves the time of the year that we are going through. It's the first month of the new Islamic year, the month of Muharram al-Haram, which is tied up with so many events even before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also the loss of life during the time of the Anbiya, and indeed the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and eventually the martyrdom of Sayyidina Hussein radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. It's a challenging time, but it's a beginning. And I want to end with the dua that Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam made when by chance he was given the mantle of prophethood. He went out and had the burning bush experience, and from that he came back with the responsibility of conveying Allah's message. The responsibility falls on us as well at this crucial time of conveying the true value and the true spirit of Islam, of brotherhood, of care, of compassion and concern, and to see our brothers and sisters that are going through this trauma, not as strangers, but our very own. We are one family. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to feel that pain, that suffering, like a body feels when one part of it is in pain. The whole body is restless and pains and suffers together. May Allah give us that feeling of solidarity, that sense of identity and belonging, not just in sense of geography, of culture, of language, or national borders, but in the sense of the loss, spiritual loss, the trauma, the pain and the hurt and the suffering that they are going through. May we feel that pain in the true sense of the word and do something even at a very small level that is constructive, that is engaging, and that is truly intention-wise sincere. I end with the dua that is common for gatherings such as this, where we are bouncing off ideas and trying to find a solution. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي هارون أخي أشدد به أزري وأشركه في أمري كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا إنك كنت بنا بصيرا سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
Jazakallah khair. Ameen, ameen, ameen. And for everybody else, you know, we thank you for joining us today. I just want to reiterate that form will now be the launch pad for moving on from this. It isn't just about the session today and that's it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all your efforts as well, everybody on here, and all the work that you're all doing in whatever way, form, and at whatever level that you're all doing it as well. I mean, so Jazakallah khair from me and everybody else on the team. And special thanks to all of our panelists and on all the good words and important information that they've shared with us today. And we hope hopefully to see all of you in the next session, maybe if we do another one, and certainly in any engagements that we have after this. So thank you very much. We won't take any more of your time, and we'll end there. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Goodbye to everybody.